All right, if you managed to stay through part one, thank you. Now it's time for part two. Stay tuned. Okay, so this particular policy that was released in 2015, or rather leaked in 2015, as you can see on the screen, states children of a parent living in a same gender relationship. A natural or adopted child of a parent living in a same gender relationship, whether the couple is married or cohabitating, may not receive a name and a blessing. A natural or adopted child of a parent living in a same gender relationship, whether the couple is married or cohabitating, may be baptized and confirmed, ordained, or recommended for missionary service only as follows. A mission or stake president may request approval from the office of the First Presidency to baptize and confirm, ordain, or recommend missionary service for a child of a parent who has lived or is living in a same gender relationship when he is satisfied by personal interviews that both of the following requirements are met. The child accepts and is committed to live the teachings and doctrine of the Church, and specifically disavow the practice of same gender cohabitation and marriage. The child is of legal age and does not live with a parent who has lived or currently lives in a same gender cohabitation relationship or marriage. So just to summarize that policy, if you yourself or your parents are gay, you are barred from the church. You cannot be baptized. You cannot receive the name and a blessing which accompanies baby blessings and confirmation like you might think of in other churches. You cannot serve a mission. You must, one, become a legal adult first. Secondly, you must move out of your parents' house even if they are not presently living in a gay relationship. You still cannot be living with them if they simply have previously been in a gay relationship even. And you must disavow your parents, you must disavow their lifestyle, you must disavow all kinds of homosexual activity before you can become a member of the church. And then only with one, a recommendation from local leadership, and authorization and permission from the First Presidency of the Church, which is the highest governing body of the church. So this really was a policy that very much affected a lot of families in the Mormon Church and was a key contributor to excessive gay LGBTQ GSRM suicide rates in Utah. This tore families apart. It hurt people, and it hurt them a lot. This was a tipping point for me. I was already kind of going up against the church in a few different issues, which I won't get into, but I was already having problems and disagreements with church leadership on key issues. And this, for me, when this policy was leaked, was a tipping point. And I'll admit, I became angry, and it was at that point that really kind of tipped the scales of balance for me and led to my eventual leaving the church a couple months later. But one thing I do find is that with this is Jana Reese really seems to avoid or skirt the issue as far as just how extensive the backlash, both internally and externally, the church received from this, but rather focused on individual responses. I mean, she at least acknowledges that the policy was leaked, but really kind of avoids the backlash the church suffered and experienced from this policy. And that is really an unfortunate issue. It's really unfortunate that she doesn't get more into that, because there really was a lot of backlash. There have been mass resignation events ever since. The amount of people leaving the church has really picked up since then as a result of this. And the church leadership response certainly didn't help with this. We have statements from leaders in the church, such as Dallin H. Oaks, one of the church's apostles, which he stated in 2017, converted Latter-day Saints are ones who believe the church's teachings on traditional marriage, and suggested that Mormons who disagreed with this policy or the church's position didn't really understand their own religion. And that in 2016, then Russell M. Nelson, who was an apostle, he was just an elder apostle, who is now the president and leader of the Mormon Church, said that those that don't accept this policy that was leaked in 2015 as divine revelation were actually acting under the influence of Satan. So it really kind of suggests that those who disagree with them in the leadership are at best unconverted and at worst under demonic influence. which really is unfortunate because these are some of the key issues, and it really kind of puts a us versus them mentality. And I really think that that is absolutely unfortunate and sad that that has happened. And for me, like I said, it was one of the key issues that eventually led to me leaving the Book of Mormon behind, leaving the church behind, and just eventually moving on with my life. And it really just seems that more and more, and I'm not surprised by this finding, that more and more millennials are going up against church leadership, are acting in accordance with their own conscience, as opposed to simply admitting or defaulting to following church leadership. What we see now is that only about 49% of millennials have said that they would follow church leadership, even if it went against their conscience. Whereas in previous generations, we're reporting up to 65% would take that same approach. So the amount of people going through this and willing to speak up on these issues continues to increase, and this is going to have a dramatic impact on the church as a whole. And I think overall, though, it really does capture the reality and reasons for the mass exodus of millennials within the LDS church. People feeling judged, LGBT issues, patriarchy within the church, and the top leadership. And these ideas of unquestioning obedience seem to be top and common issues within the church. It's a common trope within the church that people simply leave because they want to sin or they become offended or they're under Satan's lure. But the reality is, as the Next Mormon shows, this is not even close. Like, it's far more complicated than that. I mean, even myself, I was told that I would be excommunicated for taking a stand for my family in the LGBT community and going through the process of expressing my concerns within the church. So this idea that people are just leaving because they're offended or want to sin is absolutely ridiculous and doesn't hold up the scrutiny when we look at it, as this book shows. And it really overall, I think, was a well-written book. And like I said, it really kind of missed the boat on the extent of the November 2015 policy and the real backlash the church suffered, while only focusing on the stories of those who were personally hurt by it. They don't really get into too much detail about the actual backlash, which, by the way, that policy was actually reversed in April of this year as a result of that backlash and public pressure. And so the church has changed its position. While they still say that marriage is only between a man and a woman, they've reversed their policy concerning the LGBTQ issues that was released in 2015 because of that public backlash. And I think that's really key to understanding that pressure, the actions of the millennials in the church, the impact that the amount of people that have left the church over these issues has had, really put the pressure onto the church to reverse their poorly thought out decision. And I think the fact that they didn't want it to be publicly released and it was a leaked document really kind of sprung this backlash, and that says a lot about whether they thought they were right. I mean, they wanted to keep it private. They didn't want it to be publicly known, and that's a key indicator of how they knew it would be received to begin with. And I think the final paragraph in this book really kind of sums it up well about what this book is all about, and also the position that the church is in. So I'll just read that to you quickly. The question ahead for the LDS Church as it moves further into the 21st century is how far is it willing to accommodate new social norms, if the risk of not doing so is that, in the United States at least, a substantial percentage of its young people may exit the doors. Is that loss a cost the church will deem unacceptable, changing its course to stem the tide? Or will those exiles be considered necessary collateral damage as the institution clings to its post-war brand identity as a religion devoted to a particular configuration of the nuclear family? While I said I would not be proffering a grand theory about Mormonism's future, I will end by pointing to the historically informed wisdom of the Moses thesis, the LDS Church has accommodated change before, and it can do so again. The issue is whether it will choose to. Overall, I have to say, fantastic book. It's a great book for Mormons to read, to understand why people such as myself left the church. It is a fantastic book that Mormon leaders need to read to try to get a better grasp on the reality of what they're doing to people, how they're hurting them, and what they can do to change to fix that. And if you're not a Mormon, it would be a great book to read for understanding of what's happening and that's the Mormon Church itself, or even if you know a Mormon or someone who has left. And while the trends of Mormonism, the decrease in overall religiosity of individuals, and people leaving the religion, this is not something that is unique to Mormonism. This is something that is happening across all religious faiths. This book is really eye-opening to those particular issues that are particularly being affected within the Mormon Church itself. And I absolutely loved it. And I think it's a great book overall. And if you are watching, if you have stayed to the end of this review, I know it's a significantly longer review than normal. I want to thank you for that. Really appreciate you sticking around to watch to the end. And I hope you enjoyed this review. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I know it's been a long one, so thank you for sticking around to the end. And I look forward to seeing you next time on the next episode of Drew's Book Reviews. Next time on Drew's Book Reviews, we will be talking about The 100 by Cass Morgan. Stay tuned.